April 22nd, 1851. Chapel House, Twickenham. My dear Miss Patmore, I thought I had never seen a finer child. He looked, I thought, as if he had had a battle for his life. The nurse had dressed him up in a white frock. Ever yours, Alfred Lord Tennyson.
Braintree, Massachusetts, March 31st, 1776. My dearest husband, John Adams, I am hoping that when you are with your compatriots Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin at the Continental Congress so far away in Philadelphia, I long to hear from you that you have declared an independency. And in this new code of laws, which I suppose it will be necessary for you to make, I desire you would remember the ladies and be more generous and favorable to them than your ancestors. Do not put such unlimited power into the hands of husbands. Remember, all men would be tyrants if they could.
Oh, my dear, sweet Mrs. Abigail Adams, as to your extraordinary code of laws, I cannot but laugh. But we are at work upon a declaration of independence from tyranny.
As your sex are naturally tyrannical is a truth so thoroughly established as to admit of no dispute. Why then not put out of the power of the vicious and the lawless to use us as cruelty and with indignity? Men of sense abhor those customs which treat us only as vassals of your sex.
The loyalists, right? They keep telling us that our struggle for freedom has loosed the bonds of government everywhere, that children and apprentices were disobedient, that schools and colleges were grown turbulent, that Indians had slighted their guardians, and Negroes have grown insolent to their masters.
I have sometimes been ready to think that the passion for liberty cannot be equally as strong in the breasts of those who have been accustomed to deprive their fellow creature of theirs. I am certain it is not founded upon the genuine and Christian principle of doing unto others as we would have them do unto us.
Your letter was the first intimation that a tribe more numerous and powerful than all the rest were grown discontented.
If you are proclaiming peace and goodwill to all men, emancipating all nations, and yet you still insist upon retaining absolute power over wives?
Depend upon it! We know better than to repeal our masculine systems.
If particular care is not paid to the ladies, we are determined to foment a rebellion and will not hold ourselves bound by any laws which we have no voice or representation.
I hold it true. Whatever befall, I feel it when I sorrow most. 'Tis better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all.
2014 open letter to Mary Ann Williamson about abortion. My name is David Graham Casso, and you don't know me, but you've been asking my vote for these past few weeks. I'm writing because I'm pretty frustrated by some of the things you've been saying as you campaign to represent my family and my community in Congress. And I wanted to ask you a few questions.
2014 open letter to legislators from a clinic escort. I am a human shield. I stand alongside patients so they can access their doctor's office safely without threats or shaming. I have seen and heard things that would offend you, even terrify you on your city sidewalks. I volunteered to do this work, protecting your citizens, knowing that it is not my job, it's yours.
2013, open letter to Texas legislators. All eyes are on Texas as the fate of a far-reaching measure to restrict abortions and close many abortion facilities faces its last days of debate. Abortion generates strong emotions on all sides. This is true within our own organization, the American Congress of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, ACOG, and we respect that our 58,000 members have deeply held personal beliefs on this topic.
2011, written testimony from the reproductive justice community. We write as organizations concerned with protecting the rights and ensuring the well-being of women of color. We as organizations are dedicated to reproductive justice, and we are outraged by the introduction of H.R. 3541, the Susan B. Anthony and Frederick Douglass Prenatal Non-Discrimination Act, PRENDA of 2011.
2005, open letter to religious leaders on abortion as moral decision. As religious leaders, we are committed to supporting people's efforts to achieve spiritual, emotional, and physical well-being, including their reproductive and sexual health. We assist women and families confronted with unintended pregnancies or pregnancies that can no longer be carried to term.
I desire you would remember the ladies.
My dear Anne, he was as grand-looking a little fellow as I ever saw, as large as if he had been 3 months old at least. The doctor said he would have been very hefty if he could have escaped this accident of birth.
Philadelphia, July 8, 1777, Tuesday. Next month completes 3 years that I've been devoted to the servitude of liberty, and a year since the Revolution was declared, engaged on 26 committees, the most pressing of which as president of the Board of War. The last, an honor to which I never aspired, a trust to which I feel myself vastly unequal, but I am determined to do as well as I can. To a man whose attachments to his family are as strong as mine, absence alone from such a wife and such children would be a great sacrifice. How often have I seen in my dreams my dearest friend, a widow and her charming prattler's orphans, exposed to the insolence of unfeeling, impious tyrants. Yet, the horrid vision has never, for one moment, shaken the resolution of my heart.
Braintree, July 9th, 1777. As I sit down to write you this letter, I've been unwell for this past week with some complaints that have been new to me, though I hope not dangerous.
Oh, my mind is anxious again, and my heart in pain for my dearest friend.
I was last night taken with a shaking fit, and I am apprehensive that a life was lost.
The whole night before he was born, he was vigorously alive, but in being born, he died. I suspect it was that fall Emily had some weeks ago that shook him out of his place.
Before this reaches you, I hope that you will be happy in the embraces of a daughter, as fair, as good, and wise and virtuous as the mother. Or if it is a son, I hope it will still resemble the mother in person, mind, and heart.
I would have you not so much alarmed. I keep my spirits up yet, though I would have you be prepared in the event that something should happen.
Oh, that I could be near to say a few kind words or show a few kind looks or do a few kind actions. Oh, that I could take away from my dearest a bit of her despair or relieve her of the whole.
I have not let Emily see any of the letters, fearing to excite her. Yours truly, A. Tennyson.
I should give you some background. Last November, my wife and I felt our son kick for the first time. A few days later, A routine checkup became a nightmare when we learned that something was wrong with his brain. After weeks of tests and retests and bad news somehow becoming worse news, we were told that he has about a 50% chance of surviving after being born, and absolutely no chance of ever having brain function.
While we can agree to disagree about abortion because of our different ideologies, we must draw a hard line at legislation that threatens women's health, like Texas HB2 and SB1, and speak to the false and misleading underlying assumptions of this and other legislation like it.
I desire that you would remember the ladies.
While Prender claims to support gender equity and civil rights, it does neither. Instead, it discriminates against women of color and calls into question our ability to make decisions about our own bodies.
I'm not the police. I'm not a lawmaker. I'm just a neighbor, a friend, a compassionate face in a sea full of picketers screaming hate and spewing bile at your voters as they approach the door of a reproductive healthcare facility.
We affirm women as moral agents who have the capacity, right, and responsibility to make the decision as whether or not abortion is justified in their specific circumstances. That decision is best made when it includes a well-informed conscience, serious reflection, insights from her faith and values, and consultation with a caring partner, family members, and spiritual counselor. Men have a moral obligation to acknowledge and support women's decision-making.
We made a decision as a family to say goodbye to our son before ever getting to meet him. My wife has bravely shared her story. I think it is important that I do the same when someone who is seeking a position to represent me and my family espouses nonsense that would have a direct impact on me and my family.
Little bosom, noble forehead, little hands.
'Tis now 48 hours since I can say I enjoyed any ease. The doctor encourages me to hope, and that my apprehensions are groundless respecting what I wrote to you yesterday, though I cannot say that I have any reason to alter my mind. I pray heaven that it may be soon, or else I will be worn out.
Clenched, as in the fight.
3 times have I felt the most distressing sympathy with my partner without being able to afford her any kind of solace or assistance. When the family was sick of dysentery and so many of our friends died of it, when you all had smallpox, and now I feel as anxious as ever.
Little bosom not yet cold, noble forehead made for thought, little hands of mighty mold, clenched as in the fight which they had fought.
This morning I'm rather more ill than I was yesterday. But this day, 10 years ago, brought us John, and I held him in my arms. And I pray that this day will give me another reason to rejoice.
He had done battle to be born, but some brute force of nature had prevailed, and the little warrior failed.
Mr. John Adams, the day before yesterday, Mrs. Adams was delivered of a daughter. But it grieves me to add, sir, that it was stillborn. It was an exceedingly looking fine child, J. Thaxter Jr.
Whose life was ended ere thy breath begun. Thou 9 months neighbor of my dear one's heart.
Before this reaches you, I hope you will be happy in the embraces of a little female beauty. God bless her. Pray, let me continue to hear from you every week. If you can't write, make some other pen do the duty.
And howsoever thou liest blind and mute, thou lookest bold and resolute. God bless thee, dearest son.
I read recently in the Los Angeles Times that you once said that you support speed bumps for women seeking abortions. Put another way, you thought that there should be at least 3 mandated meetings with strangers that would try to talk a woman out of her decision before she was allowed to continue with the procedure. My first question is this: did you ever think of the real-world implications of this way of trying to prevent women from having abortions? Or did you even consider how what you were saying would hurt real people? And you said it anyways.
There must only be 2 people in our exam rooms, the doctor and the patient. Legislative mandates to the practice of medicine do not allow for an infinite array of exceptions where the mandate is unnecessary, inappropriate, or even harmful to the individual patient. Patient autonomy, the needs, values, and preferences must be respected.
We recognize that this bill is an attack on our right to self-determine whether and when to have children. And we refuse to allow race and gender to be wielded as a weapon to undermine abortion rights by decision makers who don't know anything about our community. For example, this year, many in Congress voted to defund family planning, ban abortion coverage in legislature health insurance exchanges, and allow providers to refuse abortion care even when a woman's life is in danger.
The ability to choose an abortion should not be compromised by economic, educational, class, or marital status, age, race, geographic location, or inadequate information. Current measures that limit women's access to abortion services by denying public funds for low-income women, coercing parental consent and notification, and banning medical procedures are punitive and do nothing to promote moral decision-making.
Picketers record staff members and patients as they enter the clinics, often posting these videos on blogs and YouTube channels, with names when possible. Dr. George Tiller was killed in 2009 while attending Sunday service at his church. And the provider who reopened a clinic in the same location wears a bulletproof vest to work. The National Abortion Federation reports more than 300 incidents of assault, burglary, arson, and threats just from 2010 through 2012. I was sped on, chased into the streets, and had patients run to me for cover from aggressive picketers. Thanks to the modest buffer zone in Chicago, there are restrictions around clinic entrances. So I hadn't seen a truly terrifying level of verbal abuse or physical intimidation until I arrived in New Jersey.
We condemn physical and verbal violence.
We condemn harassment directed against abortion clinics, their staffs, and their clients.
My dear Robert, I would not send a notice of my misfortune to the Times, and I have had to write some 60 letters. If you desire to know about it, ask Edmund Lushington to show that letter which I wrote to him.
July 16, 1777. Join with me, my dearest friend, in gratitude in heaven, that a life I know you value has been spared and carried through distress and danger, although the dear infant is numbered with its ancestors. The circumstance circumstances which put an end to its existence was evident upon its birth, but at this distance, I don't want to put it into a letter that may fall into the hands of some unfeeling ruffian, and I must omit particulars, but suffice it to say that it wasn't owing to any injury which I had sustained, nor could any care of mine have prevented it.
My wife has been going on very well since, but last night she lost her voice and I feared I should lose her. She is, however, free from all danger, according to my medical man.
My apprehensions with regard to it were well-founded, though my friends would fain persuade me that it was the vapors or the spleen had taken a hold of me, but I was as perfectly sensible about its decease as I ever was of its existence. I was also aware of the danger that awaited me, and though my sufferings were great, thanks be to heaven, I was carried through it, and silently submitted to the dispensations and the loss of a sweet daughter. It appeared to be a very fine babe, as it never opened its eyes in this world. It looked as though it were just asleep.
I refused to see the little body at first, fearing to find some pallid abortion which would have haunted me all my life. But he looked, if it be not absurd to call a newborn babe so even majestic in his mysterious silence, after all the turmoil of the night before. He was not born. I cannot call it born, for he never breathed, but he was released from the prison which he moved for 9 months on Easter Sunday, awful day. We lived close upon an English church chapel. The organ rolled, the psalm sounded, and the wail of a woman in her travail, of a true and tender nature suffering, rose ever and anon.
I had pleased myself with the idea of presenting you with a beautiful child, a fine son or a daughter upon your return. And I had figured to myself that I would see your smiles of joy. But those dreams are buried in the grave, as fleeting as a morning cloud in the evening dew. I feel myself weakened by this exertion, though I could not refrain from writing you with my own hand.
Had he lived, the doctor said he would have been very lusty and healthy. He was a grand, massive-looking man-child, noble brow and hands, which he had clenched as in his determination to be born. I kissed them and came away. And I have suffered more than ever I thought possible for a child still born. I am foolish enough to be affected with all this. Emily has borne all with the utmost fortitude. The doctor says it is not likely to occur again if God gives us another.
The sanctity of human life is best upheld when we assure that it is not created carelessly. It is precisely because life and parenthood are so precious that no woman should be coerced to carry a pregnancy to term. We uphold the teaching of many religious traditions. The health and life of the woman must take precedence over the life of the fetus.
I desire you would remember the ladies.
Women across this nation are completely capable of making their own medical decisions with their physicians, as they make many other important decisions every day for themselves, their families, and their businesses. Women do not need, nor do they want, any government to make medical decisions for them.
I desire you would remember the ladies.
This bill places an unfair burden on women of color that other women do not have to face. Increased scrutiny around our motives for seeking abortion care. This scrutiny promotes racial profiling by pushing doctors to assume Black, Latina, and Asian American women are seeking abortions because of the sex of the fetus and the gender.
I desire you would remember the ladies.
In New Jersey, the abolished humane abortion picketers go beyond the typical, don't kill your baby, and no mommy, don't do it, reported by volunteers around the country. Personal slurs are leveled against escorts from inches behind them by physically imposing men. Picketers demand companions, be a man, dad, and go back inside to save your child. I watched them relentlessly chase after a husband who tearfully confessed to them his wife's non-viable, but very much wanted pregnancy.
I desire you would remember the ladies.
You see, after the late discovery of my son's malignant brain tumor, the tests we went through to be sure, the retests we went through to be absolutely sure, the appointments, the sleepless nights, the unbelievable grief. My wife was nearing 24 weeks by the time she went through with the procedure. If you had it your way, we would have been forced to have a stranger insultingly ask us if we really thought hard enough about this decision that we knew was the most humane thing we could do for our son. Your delay would have worked, and our government would have prevented us from making the decision we know in our hearts was right for our family.
I desire you would remember the ladies.
My dear Forster, many thanks for your kind note. I've been going on very well since, and my wife is doing much better. I am less moved than I was at first. Mrs. Marshall, who had seen the little fellow, said he was nobly made, and she, having ought to have had a family, should know. But that perhaps makes it all the sadder. Perhaps if he had been a 7 months sickly spindling, I should have minded it less. But I don't know. He was the grandest looking child I had ever seen.
Scripture neither condemns nor prohibits abortion. It does, however, call us to act compassionately and justly when facing difficult moral decisions. Scriptural commitment to truth-telling means women must have accurate information as they make their decisions. No government committed to human rights and democracy can privilege the teachings of one religion over another. No single religious voice can speak for all faith traditions on abortion, nor should government take sides on religious differences. Women must have the right to apply or reject the principles of their own faith without legal restrictions.
These bills ban abortion at 20 weeks based on the inaccurate argument that a fetus can feel pain. Rigorous scientific reviews have concluded that there is no evidence of fetal perception of pain until 29 weeks, at the earliest. These bills would require physicians who perform abortions to have admitting privileges at hospitals within 30 miles and only allow abortions at clinics that meet surgical clinical standards, despite there being no surgical procedure involved. Government regulations would be that much more stricter of a colonoscopy and other similar low-risk procedures. Abortions have minimal, less than 0.5% risk of major complications that may lead to additional health needs.
Moreover, making abortion harder to obtain will exacerbate the health disparities women of color already face. Black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related causes than white women. And the unattended pregnancy rate is 67% compared to 40% white women. Family planning programs allow women of color to access contraceptives, prevent unplanned pregnancies, and improve healthcare outcomes for themselves and their children. Yet the proponents of this bill have repeatedly proposed legislation to cut funding for family planning and women's healthcare programs.
I read recently in the LA Times that you often once counseled women not to make the decision impulsively or casually. Was it your intent to say that women making this decision are making it impulsively or casually? Because it sounds like you think it is possible for a woman and her family to make this decision impulsively or casually. Do you have any idea how unbelievably difficult this decision is?
As through the land at eve we went, and plucked the ripened ears. We fell out, my wife and I. Oh, we fell out, I know not why, and kissed again with tears.
My dearest friend, never in my whole life was my heart affected with such emotions and sensation as were this day, the 10th, 11th, and 16th of July. I feel a grief and mortification that is heightened, though it is not wholly occasioned by my sympathy with the mother.
And blessings on the falling out, that all the more endears. When we fall out with those we love, and kiss again with tears.
Is it not unaccountable that one should feel so strong an affection for an infant that one has not seen nor shall see? Yet I must confess to you that the loss of this sweet little girl has most tenderly and sensibly affected me.
For when we came where lies the child, we lost in other years. There above the little grave, oh, there above the little grave, we kissed again with tears.
According to this Times, the remarks were made years before current efforts to scale back abortion rights in political movements that have been called an attack on women. Did the Times get this correct? Or did you actually imply that your speed bumps proposal wasn't as bad until the Republicans made it look bad by adopting it?
Women must have access to all needed health care, from mammograms, prenatal visits, to reproductive care, based on scientific facts and not political ideologies. Politicians are not elected to, nor should they, legislate the practice of medicine or step foot into our exam rooms. Sincerely, Janine A. Conry, MD, PhD, President, the American Congress of Obstetricians and Gynecologists.
The truth is that we know what is best for us and our children. And our decisions are most often based on whether we can raise children with dignity and in a healthy way. Sincerely signed, the 24 undersigned member organizations of the reproductive justice community.
We reaffirm this theological commitment. Women must be able to make their own moral decisions based on conscience and faith. We call for an increased dialogue and respectful listening with those who disagree with us. With them, we share the vision of a world where all children are loved and wanted. We renew our call for the relational and reproductive justice for all from a colloquium of theologians sponsored by the Religious Institute on Sexual Morality, Justice, and Healing.
This country has a long tradition of partitioning protesters to maintain peaceable assembly. A reasonable distance could be 8 feet or across the street, just far enough for an individual's healthcare needs and life choices, not to be twisted into a political display or shaming exercise. On behalf of those who seek refuge and medical care within your city limits, Katie Klabouche, Clinic Escort.
My last question. How can I trust you to represent me and my family in Congress? Sincerely, David Graham Casa.
We desire you would remember the ladies.
Dead as he was, I felt proud of him. Today, when I write this down, the remembrance of it rather overcomes me. But I am glad that I have seen him. Dear little nameless one, who has lived though thou hast never breathed. I, thy father, love thee and weep over thee, though thou hast no place in the universe. Who knows? It may be that thou hast.
I desire you would remember the ladies.
The sweet little girl.
Our family.
'Tis better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all.
I desire you would
Remember